Good morning, third grade. How are you guys doing? Weeks and weeks of this long distance learning is getting very tiring for me. How about you guys? So today is actually our last day for Humphrey. We're going to be reading chapter 15, and then we're going to go into a new book, okay, which will be tomorrow. Yeah, Dog Napped Cat, and it's a fun book. It's all about finding a cat that gets dog napped. You might say, how can a cat get dog napped? You'll find out in this story. Then we gotta look for Samson. And I know I said this before, but my problem is this is my second time reading chapter 15 because literally I was one page away from being all done and my computer went, nah, we're done right now. So I'm redoing this. So I'm not sure if I told you about Dog Napped Cat in the video I had to delete because it went crazy, or if I told you about one that I actually put up. So if I'm telling you again about Dog Napped Cat, I'm really sorry. And if I'm not, well, see, new news. Does that ever happen to you? Does your computer just like go, ah? I know some of you have emailed me, messaged me on Google and told me how you sometimes have issues with yours too. Some poor person, which I'm not going to name their name, but they'll know who they are. They spent like 3 hours downloading a science video, the one with the different categories of animals, and it still wasn't downloaded. So you're not the only one that has technical difficulties, so does Mrs. Johnson. All right, so are you excited to see what happens with Humphrey here in the last chapter? Okay, there's a lot of surprises. Okay, are you ready? All right, here we go. Happy Hamster Day. That's the name of our chapter, okay? In December, things in room 26 really began to change. For one thing, it got cold outside and a little chilly by my window. In the early morning, frost pictures would appear on the glass. One picture was like a big snowflake. Another like a lion, scary. Still, it was nice and cozy in my sleeping house. More snowflakes appeared, not real ones, but ones cut out of paper, bordered all the chalkboards. And there were snowmen made of fluffy cotton and pictures of candles and packages and sleighs. The holidays were almost here, Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa. There were songs to be sung and presents to be wrapped and a big 2-week vacation to come. The weekend after Thanksgiving break, I went home with Pay Attention Art. He paid a lot of attention to me, but sometimes, not every night, during the week, Mrs. Brisbane would take me home to see Mr. Brisbane, and he'd put up the obstacle course, and we'd laugh and squeak and have a wonderful time. The next weekend, I stayed with Gail Morgenstern's house. Friday night was really nice because she convinced her mom to let me watch while they lit the menorah for the family. The food was yummy. I was glad that Mrs. Brisbane didn't take me home every night. For one thing, if I ran the obstacle course every night, I'd probably waste away to nothing. For another thing, I wouldn't have been able to see Aldo. Aldo could now balance the broom on his head. Yup. He'd put the tip of the broom on the top of his head and keep it up there for a while. He'd have to bob and weave to keep it balanced, and he made funny faces too. But one night during the week, Aldo pulled his chair up close to my cage and said, "Humphrey, old pal, I've got something to discuss." This sounded serious, so I put on my most serious problem-solving face. "I'm thinking of getting Maria a ring for Christmas." You know, like an engagement ring with something shiny in it. I know we haven't known each other very long, and we wouldn't have to get married right away. On the other hand, I'm no spring chicken, and I'd like to settle down and raise a couple of kids, and maybe a couple of hamsters. You know? I understand, I squeaked softly. So, what do you think? Aldo fixed his big brown eyes on me. Should I ask her to marry me? I stood up on my hind legs and screeched, "Do it, do it, do it!" Then he stood up and shouted, "You're right! I will! I'd be crazy not to!" He raced out of the room so fast he forgot his cleaning cart. But when he returned, he yelled, "Thanks!" Sometimes, most times, it pays to squeak up. The third weekend after Thanksgiving, I spent at Heidi Hopper's house and watched her family put up their Christmas tree. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, second only to the little tree she put in my cage. It was made out of my most favorite treat, broccoli. And then it was almost Christmas vacation. Suddenly, it seemed as if we didn't have as much work to do in class. Everyone was planning the Christmas party for the last day of school. One day, Garth, who never used to wait for the bell, stayed after school to ask Mrs. Brisbane a question. "May I please bring Humphrey home with me over the Christmas break?" he asked. Mrs. Humphrey looked as surprised as I was. "Well, Garth, I thought that was a problem." Garth smiled broadly. "My mom is much better now, and my dad says it's okay to bring Humphrey home." Mrs. Brisbane smiled back. "That is wonderful news, but I think 2 weeks might be a little much. How about the first weekend in January?" Garth nodded, but he looked disappointed. "Tell you what, why don't you have your parents bring you to my house to see Humphrey over the holidays? You can watch him run his obstacle course." Garth didn't look disappointed anymore. On the last day of school, everybody was very dressed up. I had on my fur coat as usual. Mrs. Brisbane wore a green and red striped sweater and a green skirt. She also wore a Santa Claus hat. But this was an entirely new Mrs. Brisbane, the dressing up Mrs. Brisbane. "Class, I have an important announcement. We're having a surprise visitor this morning before our party. So, there'll be no vocabulary test." After the cheers died down, Mrs. Brisbane went out in the hall and waved. A minute later, you'll never guess who entered the classroom. Who do you think it is? Who do you think it is? Let's see. It was Mr. Bert Brisbane. He was wearing a Santa Claus hat, too. He looked a lot better now. No gray stubble or wrinkled pajamas. On his lap, he had a large box. Mrs. Brisbane introduced him to the class and they all applauded. Then he told them that his surprise was actually for me. First, he pulled out something like my cage, only bigger. "This is my gift to Humphrey. This extension attaches to his cage and makes it bigger. Now you're all going to help me build Humphrey a Christmas present. His very own playground." The kids squealed and giggled and clapped, and I couldn't hold back a big squeal of my own. I could keep my homey cage with the lock that doesn't lock, but I'd also have my own park to play in. Mrs. Brisbane gathered my classmates around the big table and explained his plans. Mrs. Brisbane unloaded the pieces. First there was a seesaw, then a tree branch to swing from, and a big jungle gym and two ladders, one to climb and one to walk across like a bridge. My, my, my. So he held me while the other children worked on my cage. She patted me gently and murmured comforting words. Meanwhile, Mr. Brisbane patiently instructed the children as they arranged the pieces. He even made sure everyone got a turn. Then Mr. Morales dropped by to see how things were going. He was wearing a tie that had little Christmas lights that really lit up. He and Mrs. Brisbane stood behind the children watching as my playground took shape. "Looks like Bert should be a teacher too," said the principal told Mrs. Brisbane. "He already is," I heard her say. "He just started teaching arts and crafts to seniors and kids at the community center." "So he's made a new start," said the principal, "thanks to Humphrey." I believe those words were the best present I could ever have. "Guess what I got my kids for Christmas?" the principal asked. "A hamster. Maybe it's a present for me, too. I think my papa will enjoy it as well." When Sahib put me back in my cage, everyone watched as I raced to my new playground, climbed and the jungle gym, made a leap to the tree branch, and jumped over the seesaw. Now I could have recess anytime I wanted. Whoopee! Just then the room mothers arrived with cupcakes and juice. While they passed out the food, Sahi and Miranda slipped quietly out of the room. A little while later, Mrs. Brisbane announced that she had another surprise: gifts for the class. The door opened and in came Miranda and Sahi, wearing red dresses trimmed in white fur, not real fur like mine, and white fur hats. They each had a basket full of small presents, and they danced around the room singing a song about the wonders of Christmas, and while they passed out the gifts. When the kids opened their packages, they each found a keychain with a small furry toy hamster attached. The hamsters came in all sorts of colors: red, green, purple, gold, silver. Nice. The room mothers presented Mrs. Brisbane with a gift: a pair of red earrings, which she put on right away. I already thought it was a perfect day, but it wasn't really quite perfect until Mr. Morales peeked out into the hall and announced that he had a big surprise. I wasn't sure we could stand many more surprises. And then she walked in. The biggest surprise I could imagine. Miss Mac was back! She was wearing a long flowery skirt and a bright red blouse, and she had a butterfly in her hair. Not a real one, of course. She also had a huge canvas bag with her. "Remember me?" she asked with a huge smile. My classmates were thrilled, and they all rushed to her side. I was so surprised. I was positively squeakless. Mrs. Brisbane made everyone sit down again and asked Miss Mac, of course she insisted on calling her Miss McNamara, about her travels. Miss Mac told us about the rainforest and teaching in the school in Brazil. Then she opened her big bag and took out a stack of Christmas cards. Her Brazilian students had made a card for each student in room 26. While my classmates were sharing their cards with one another, Miss Mac came over to see me at last. "Well, I can see by your cage you've done well for yourself," she said with a smile. "And here I thought you'd be pining away for me." "I have!" I squeaked. She reached into her big bag. "And I have a present for you, but don't tell anybody." She pulled out a brand new tiny notebook with blank pages, lots of them, and a new tiny pencil with a very sharp point. I thought you might need this. Then she tucked it behind my mirror. Miss Mac stared at me a little longer, then softly said, I've seen a lot of creatures in a lot of places in the last few months, but you're still the handsomest and smartest of all. Yes, yes, yes! And don't worry, I'll be back to see you again. She was still the same wonderful Miss Mac. I'd follow her to the ends of the earth, I thought, or at least to Brazil. But then it hit me. As much as I loved her, and she loves me, Miss Mac doesn't need me. Not as much as the Brisbanes and my classmates and their families. Maybe that's what Miss Mac was thinking when she left me in room 26. This is where I belong. All too soon the bell rang. School was over for the day. School was over for the rest of the year. My head was reeling from all the surprises and excitement as we headed out to the car. In the parking lot, Aldo raced over to greet us and wish us a Merry Christmas. He had come to pick up Richie. I hope you have a very Merry Christmas too, Mrs. Brisbane told Aldo. Aldo grinned until his huge mustache shook like Santa's tummy. I'm sure I will. You see, I just got engaged. I'm going to get married. Woohoo! I squeaked with delight. Aldo leaned toward me. Thanks, my friend. That night at the Brisbane's house, there was one more surprise. The doorbell rang, and a very tall and very good-looking young man appeared. He was wearing a Santa hat, but he wasn't Santa. He was Jason, Mrs. Brisbane's son. He'd come all the way from Tokyo to surprise his parents. They were so happy to see him, they both cried just a little. I almost cried, too. Soon the house was filled with friends and neighbors, and Mrs. Brisbane played piano while everyone sang carols and drank hot cider. I nibbled on raw apples and squeaked a lot. Later that night, when the house was quiet, I thought about all I'd done in the months since I left Bedorama. I didn't know anything about the world then, but I've sure learned a lot. I can read and write. I know all the states and capitals. Just ask me one. I learned you should never, ever turn your back on a dog, and that it's a good idea to turn off the TV once in a while. I found out kids have problems, and so do teachers and principals. Sometimes all people need is a little encouragement. Most of all, I learned that one small hamster really can make a difference. I decided to write down some of these things I've learned from my adventures, but there was just one more line left in my first notebook. So I thought, and then I scribbled down exactly what I was feeling deep in my hamster heart. Joy, joy, joy to the whole wide world, and that includes you, Humphrey. Humphrey's guide, that concludes chapter 15, but they have this really cute little guide that Humphrey wrote up, so I want to read it to you. Ready? Humphrey's Guide to the Care and Feeding of Humans. Like hamsters, humans come in many, many shapes, sizes, colors, talents, and tempers. If you judge them by looks alone, you'll miss out on knowing some wonderful people. Number 2, humans like to be entertained, and it doesn't take much to entertain them. Just squeak or swing or spin. They'll love it. Number 3, hamsters are pretty entertaining themselves. Humans. Humans are pretty entertaining themselves. They can sing, dance, tell jokes, and balance brooms. 4. All humans really, really, really need someone to listen to their problems, preferably someone small and furry. Number 5. Even really important humans, like principals, have problems and need help. Number 6. Rubber bands hurt. Do not shoot rubber bands at one another unless it's absolutely the only weapon you have against a creature much bigger than you. Number 7. Humans are not very good at figuring out technical things, like how to fix a broken lock. Number 8. Humans have unlimited access to all kinds of yummy foods. So nice to be them. Number 9. If you are nice to humans, they will be nice to you. So nice they might even build you a playground. Number 10. Humans have good memories. Even if they go far away to teach in another country, they will not forget you. And believe me, you won't forget them either. Most importantly, remember, you can learn a lot about yourself by getting to know another species, even humans. Okay, now I'm going to read a little note from the author, all right, that she put in the back of the book. All right, dear reader, that would be you and me. We're reading it together, aren't we? While writing this book, I did a lot of research on hamsters and spent time admiring the cute creatures at my neighborhood pet shop. I wish I could tell you I have a hamster, but in truth, I do not. I truly love all animals, dogs, cats, ducks, goats, turtles, birds. But I happen to own a dog who is quite the hunter. Not only would she be heartbroken if I adopted a hamster, I think the tension level at home would be quite high. The only reason, I'm sorry, I forgot. Yes, that's one reason I included a chapter where Humphrey must daringly outwit the unsqueakably rude dog Clem. Even without a hamster, I feel as if I am Humphrey, because he's so much like me. First, he's an observer, which is a key quality for being a writer. I didn't sit in a cage in elementary school, but I was always watching and trying to figure out what made everybody in the classroom tick, from the teacher to the student to the custodian. Custodian is a fancy word for janitor. Okay? All right. I didn't like to have to stay home when I was sick because I was afraid I'd miss out on something interesting. Second, Humphrey is caring and kind and believes in justice. I, a mere human, may not come close to Humphrey's level of compassion, but I'll never stop trying. Third, Humphrey is enthusiastic about life and learning and the great big world and how much there is to discover about it. I get excited just thinking about this thirst for knowledge. And sometimes when I'm excited, I repeat things 3 times, but only about things I really, really, really care about, like stopping people who bully other people, or being able to point out that state you live in on the map and learn how to spell it. However, I am not nocturnal. I am definitely a morning person. Knowing Humphrey, I think he would forgive me. I love to hear the stories about your entertaining hamsters. You can email me, and she has an email address in here, or visit me online. Okay? Sincerely, Humphrey's friend, Betty G. Rennie. All right, so there are a lot of Humphrey books. You guys know that we had them in our library at school, yes. So there's Friendship and Trouble and Surprises adventures, summer, school days, and mysteries. Okay? There's also winter and secrets and Humphrey's World of Pets and Humphrey's Book of Fun, 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 which is a puzzle book. Okay? The one with pets is all about pets. So I hope you enjoyed Humphrey. Okay? So today I would actually like you, after you finish your, what is it called? The questions for today. I would like you to write for me. And I'll make it due on Friday, okay? I would like you to write for me what you liked best about Humphrey, the book. And I would like you to draw me a picture about it too, okay? So write me, what did you like about Humphrey, and draw me a picture. All right? And I will see you guys later. We'll probably not really see you. But I'll be on the video anyway. All right? I love you. I miss you. Have a great day. Bye.